Hello everyone, today I'm going to introduce you to the Magic Post Thumbnail plugin. It is a plugin that allows you to generate and insert featured images and within your articles. The major new feature of this version 6 is the ability to generate the multiple images at once in your articles. Where previously one could insert either a featured image or an image within the content with the Pro version, today one can generate as many as desired with each generation. Images can be generated as featured images within an article, at another location within an article, in custom fields, etc. Before moving on to the settings, I will quickly show you all the ways to generate your images. The first manual method will be the so-called manual way to generate your images. You will go to an article. The simplest way will be to click on Generate Automatically. So here we see, for example, that it generates the image from the image bank Unsplash. If you want to generate your image more precisely with a keyword, you can do it here with the different image banks. So here we see that in the Pro version we have Unfato, you also have Pixabay, Unsplash, Pixel, etc. Let's say we want this image. It imports the image into the media and assigns it as a featured image. We can do the same within articles, inserting an image. We will select Force, Pixabay, Insert. Use this image, and there it is inserted into the article. So that was the manual way. If you want to generate your images automatically, you select all the articles. Whatever you want, go to Bulk Actions, Generate Image, and Apply. Next, the last way to generate these images will be to activate compatibility with other plugins, particularly plugins that will automatically insert articles. You have different types of plugins that insert articles from RSS feeds or from... These will be AI generated text, so it's another way to generate your images. You can also enable cron jobs in the plugin, which will regularly run on your articles and add images to all articles that do not yet have an image. Now, let's move on to the settings. First, let's take a quick tour of the Magic Post Thumbnail dashboard. So first we have the Source tab. We can set all the image banks, their settings, their API keys. Next we have the Automatic tab. This is where we can specify where we want our images to be. We can also configure the pre-processing and post-processing of the image. Next we have the Gutenberg block. This is where we can configure the block. Then in the Pro version we have the Compatibility tab, which allows us to enable or disable compatibility with other plugins. Additionally, you also have the skull feature, which you can optionally choose to disable or enable at this location. And finally, various options such as user rights on the plugin, affiliation, upgrading to the Pro version, logs, and finally, generation. So let's start with the Source tab. This is where you have all the available image banks. You obviously have Google Images in the free version. You have Flickr, Openverse, Pixabay, and DALL-E, all still in the free version. And in the Pro version you have access to YouTube thumbnails, Unsplash, Pixels, Envato Elements, and Stab Diffusion Style. It should be noted that historically the first image source that was used at the very beginning on the plugin was Google Images. This image source is still available. However, I would like to warn those who want to use images from Google, be very careful about copyrights. The rights to images may have copyrights, and you may not be allowed to put them on your website, such as what I definitely advise you to do if you really absolutely want to use Google Images is to certainly use the Right tab and optionally set an option that allows you to use the images. This feature or functionality is quite useful. What you can also do in the Pro version is to add, restrict a domain name or blacklist a domain name. For example, if you only want images from Wikipedia, you can add the domain name of Wikipedia to the restricted domains. Then, you see that there are plenty of image bands. In general, you will need to add the API key. In general, it's quite easy to obtain. You just need to sign up on the website. There is often a link, and then create the API key and add it here. What I recommend to you as an image bank that I personally like to use is Envato Elements. It's not free. It requires a monthly subscription, but I find it really high quality in terms of existing image banks. And then in terms of AI images with artificial intelligence. You have DALL-E and Stab Diffusion. I prefer Stab Diffusion because I find that the quality is really good on Stab Diffusion 3.5 currently. And on top of that, the generation is not very long. It takes an average of 4 to 9 seconds, whereas on daily, it's more around 20 seconds, which starts to be a bit long. Then above, you have a block that is divided into two. So the Gutenberg block allows you to activate and deactivate the image banks you want to have in this specific block. And finally, the automatic block is only for the Generate Automatically button. So, when you press this Generate Automatically button, it will pull, for example, in our case, first from Google Images. If you want it to pull first from Pixabay, you move the image bank. First you can uncheck the image banks, recheck them, etc. So there you go, it's only the order of priority for the button here. So here we are in the automatic tab. This is really the tab with the most settings. As I mentioned in the introduction, this is really the place where you can insert the image wherever you want in your article. Knowing that in the free version you are allowed one block, and in the Pro version you can add as many blocks as you want. So we will take a look at all the possible options. It is always possible to insert a featured image with the image bank of your choice. We can choose Stable Diffusion as a featured image. I think it's not bad, it generates quality images. Search based on is the keyword that will be retrieved to generate the image or to search for it in the image bank in question. So if we choose title, it will be this title that will be retrieved for our example. Then you can choose either the entire title or part of the title. You can translate the retrieved keyword. So here the title in English if you have articles in other languages. It's useful when you have image banks like Pixabay, where searching in English will be easier and more relevant than in other languages. And finally, image selection. So this is good for image banks other than artificial intelligence, for example Pixabay, where if we select the first result, it will retrieve the very first image provided by Pixabay, and if we select a random result, it will choose any image. Then in our example, this time we will put an image in the content. So here, we will be interested in placing an image after the second paragraph. We could place it after a title, after a div, after a link, but to keep it simple, we will place it after the second paragraph. So in our example, we will put the new image here. We will set the size to large. We could also set it to full, but large is good. And we will choose Pixabay. This time, instead of taking the title, we will do a text analysis. So it will take the keyword that stands out from the general text. We could also analyze the previous paragraph in relation to the image, or the paragraph following the image. We can also base ourselves on the article's tags by choosing the first, last, or a random tag. The same goes for categories. For custom fields, similarly, we can base ourselves on the value of a custom field. We can make a request, customize, that is to say, put the sentence we want with variables. This includes the title, a category, a tag, a taxonomy, knowing that for the category and the taxonomy, it is customizable, as you can see here. So we will focus on text analysis. I also forgot to mention that we can retrieve the keyword from the text using OpenAI. It's another way to analyze the text. Here, you need to specify the language of the original text. And then, do we want to translate the retrieved keyword into English? So we can say yes and get a random result. And finally, I added a third image block. So we will just look at that together afterwards. But in fact, in the compatibilities, we can add additional fields. For example, if you have the ACF plugin, you can add an image field to it. So here, the name of my field will be ACF image. So I will just show you here. There you go. It gives this kind of configuration in the article. We can add the image we want. So to change it, I put unsplash based on the title. We can translate and get a random result, and we will save. So once the settings are saved, we can also see the pre-rendering of the image and the post-rendering. The pre-rendering will simply include a few options like changing the default image name, which will be the image title, but we can also set the date or a random number. We can also request to rewrite the featured image if you want to overwrite the image each time you generate it and replace it with a new one. You can make modifications to the image, flip it horizontally, and you can also crop it by 10%. It will be cropped by 10% on the edges. Next, you can add an alt attribute to the image. You know that for SEO, it's good to have an alt attribute on the image that describes the image. So if we activate it, the description can be retrieved from the source because image banks, for example like Pixabay, already provide an image description. In this case, that description will be retrieved. Or we can paste the keyword retrieved from the article in question. And we can also translate this alt attribute. We can also add a caption tag that allows us to include the name of the image's author to be perfectly compliant with your website. You can add the author's name or even the author's name along with the name of the image bank. Then for the rendering after generation. And the options for developers, you actually have the activation of certain hooks in WordPress. So I really advise you to only activate them if you are a developer and know what you are doing, because that can generate images without your consent, without you wanting it. So there you go. Use with caution. Then you have the strict search mode. It allows you to add quotes to your search. Because for example, if you search for an image on Google Images, a specific search term, if you add quotes or without quotes, the results will not always be the same. If you add quotes, you will often have fewer results, but they may be more precise. And finally, there is an interval option to limit the time for image generation, setting a delay of 20 seconds per image generation, for example. Well, I don't specifically recommend activating it, it's not necessarily very useful. So we adjust some parameters to see how the automatic generation on the articles works. We will choose 5 articles, perform a bug action, generate images, and then just wait. As a reminder, the first image should be from Stab Diffusion, then from Pixabay, and finally from Unsplash. I'll see you shortly at the end of the generation. So here we are at the end of the generation, and we are on the last article about cats. We can see that the images have been successfully generated, whether it's horses, fish, snakes, dogs, or cats. We also have the status of the generation for each article. We have details to know which keyword was retrieved for each image, the image size, the image bank, etc. Let us go to the first article to see the detailed information. So for the horses, we have the featured image with stab diffusion, the image with pixabay after, the second paragraph, and finally, the image that is inserted into the ACF field at the end, providing information about the images used in this context. So there you go, the generation worked well here. So here we are again, in the settings of the Magic Post thumbnail dashboard. As for the Gutenberg block, you have seen that there are quite a few final settings to define for the Pro version. You have compatibility options to enable. As we saw earlier, we had an ACF field in the automatic settings. We can also enable compatibility with CMB2 and metabox.io. We will save it, refresh the page, and you will see that new fields appear if you want to set your images with these plugins. You can also easily enable compatibility with feature image from URL, also with REST queries, and with all these plugins: WP, All Import, WP, Ematico, Feed WordPress, WP, Automatic, Plugin, which are plugins that allow importing or automatically generating articles. And finally, let's move on to the slightly less important settings. So, in Pro, we have the Proxy tab, which allows you to set a proxy for requests to your image banks. So it's not necessarily especially useful. You have the Feature-Rich Rights tab, which allows you to assign the Magic Dashboard to certain users. Finally, you have the affiliation, if you're interested in becoming an affiliate of the plugin. You have the tab to migrate to the Pro version. And finally, you have the Logs tab, which is disabled by default, but you can enable it to understand how the plugin works. If you need support with an issue, the support team may ask you to enable the logs and copy and paste them. And finally, the last tab, you know it, it's the Generation tab when you send images to be generated. And there you have it. This tutorial video is now finished. I would especially like to thank those who leave reviews on WordPress.org, those who send me emails, whether to resolve bugs or even to suggest improvements to the plugin. If you have any ideas in mind, feel free to send emails. I will also leave you the link to the documentation in the description. You can read the documentation to delve deeper into the subject for the settings, knowing that I couldn't cover everything, otherwise the video would be too long. But there you go. I covered the essentials. Thank you for listening and see you soon.